It started with a boat that didn't stop. Then came the gunshots, and now the U.S. Coast Guard is fighting a new kind of war at sea. While the headlines focus on politics and policies, something more dangerous is happening off the southern coast. It's fast, organized, and powered by billions in cartel money. But what's fueling this shift? And why is America suddenly using drones, warships, and federal agents to hunt down smugglers in open waters? Let's find out with Blue Navy. With the U.S.-Mexico land border becoming harder to cross, cartels are now turning to the ocean. In the past, smugglers could drive across lightly guarded desert routes or blend into crowds at border checkpoints. But since tighter border enforcement began, many of those paths have been closed off. That shift has forced criminal groups to find a new route, and now they are using boats, speedcraft, and open waters to continue their illegal trade. The U.S. Coast Guard and Border Patrol have responded quickly. According to officials, there have already been over 350 maritime encounters where agents had to turn off cartel vessels by targeting their engines. These boats often ignored direct orders to stop, which forced agents to follow a strict escalation protocol. First, they use loudspeakers and flashing lights to order the vessel to halt. If that fails, they fire warning shots. They aim at the engines only when all else fails, stopping the craft before it reaches U.S. shores. These operations are not easy. The open sea is vast, the conditions change fast, and the targets are often small, fast-moving boats. Smugglers sometimes make aggressive turns or try to ram patrol ships, adding even more risk to each mission. The U.S. has reported 0 injuries during all 350 recorded cases. This shows the high level of discipline and training within these maritime units, especially considering that some encounters happen at night or in rough weather. Many of these chases occur in areas where the border wall extends into the ocean. From the sky, it looks like the wall disappears into the waves. But on the water, it's clear that the boundary continues without the same level of physical enforcement. Smugglers know this and try to exploit these gaps by launching boats from nearby coves and beaches, often just outside Mexico's jurisdiction. What's different now is that the U.S. has shifted resources to meet this challenge. Fast response teams are on alert day and night using radar, infrared sensors, and aerial support to track potential threats. Instead of relying only on static barriers, the new strategy uses mobility and quick reaction time to prevent illegal entries. The Coast Guard is not acting alone either. It works closely with Navy units and federal agencies to cover more ground and respond faster when threats appear. The rise in maritime smuggling shows how determined these criminal networks are. They adapt fast, avoid land-based security, and test how far they can go before getting caught. This sea-based shift is not just a new method of smuggling, it's a direct answer to stronger border policies. And it proves that organized crime is watching and reacting in real time. But stopping boats is only one part of the mission. In the next section, we'll explore the advanced technology the U.S. is now deploying to outsmart smugglers before they even hit the water. The U.S. is no longer just using boats and patrol crews to stop smugglers. It's now using advanced military tech to protect the coast. As criminal operations grow more aggressive and unpredictable, the response from American forces has become smarter and faster. The Navy, Coast Guard, and Border Patrol are working together like never before, creating a 3-layer defense that stretches across sea, air, and shore. One of the most important new tools in this fight is a drone called the XP-4, developed through a $4.6 million contract. This drone was designed to support long missions in dangerous or distant waters. What makes the XP-4 special is its unique design. It folds its wings like a helicopter during takeoff and landing, but flies like an airplane once in the air. This gives it flexibility and endurance that traditional aircraft do not have. The XP-4 can carry supplies, rescue gear, or surveillance equipment long distances without a pilot on board. That means it can fly into risky areas to drop off life rafts or emergency kits without putting American lives in danger. In past missions, crews used helicopters or small boats to move items between ships or rescue people at sea. The XP-4 can do that job more safely and at a much lower cost. Besides its cargo role, this drone is a powerful tool for detection. Its high-altitude sensors and long battery life allow it to monitor large sections of coastline for extended periods. In places where radar can't see clearly or ships can't reach quickly, the XP-4 becomes the first line of defense. Hovering above suspicious areas alerts crews on the water and gives them time to plan a safe strategic response. Using drones like this also helps fill the gaps in sea patrols. With thousands of miles of coastline and a limited workforce, the Coast Guard cannot be everywhere at once. But with the help of uncrewed aircraft, they can extend their reach and track threats before they get too close. These drones don't replace human crews, but give them extra eyes in the sky and help them make faster, better decisions. America's drone program at sea is part of a larger shift toward tech-based border control. It reflects how seriously the government takes the threat from organized crime on the water. Instead of reacting after smugglers arrive, these tools allow forces to intercept threats earlier and act more precisely. The XP-4 is just one example of how the US uses innovation to gain the upper hand. And while it's designed for border security now, experts say this type of drone could also be used for military logistics, medical delivery, or even covert surveillance in conflict zones. But no matter how advanced the technology is, the threat behind it drives the response. Next, we look at how massive and dangerous the cartel business has become. Amateurs don't run the drug trade at sea. It's controlled by criminal organizations worth billions. According to US government estimates, cartel operations across the Americas generate over $13 billion each year, and much of that profit is tied to smuggling routes into the United States. These groups don't just move drugs. They transport weapons, people, and anything else that brings in money. They operate like paramilitary units, not simple gangs. Many boat operators involved in these smuggling missions are trained and experienced. Some have criminal records stretching back years, and others have direct links to cartel networks with deep pockets and political influence. When US forces stop them at sea, they don't always surrender. Sometimes they've attempted to ram Coast Guard vessels or make dangerous turns to shake off pursuit. The risk of violence is always present. The United States has been forced to take a stricter approach to deal with these threats. Coast Guard and Navy ships are now trained to use military-style tactics to stop fast-moving vessels. One example is the pit maneuver at sea, which involves a patrol ship making contact at an angle to spin the smuggler's boat and bring it to a halt. This method, borrowed from highway chases, is complex on water, but has proven effective. Even with better gear and more training, every encounter remains dangerous. Smugglers have been known to carry firearms, and some vessels are modified to be faster or more challenging to detect. US forces rely on coordinated actions between air, land, and sea units in response. Drones spot the targets, warships close in, and boarding teams prepare for conflict if needed. The stakes are high because the smugglers are backed by powerful money. Every successful shipment strengthens the cartels, funds more weapons, and increases their ability to corrupt officials on both sides of the border. If the US fails to act decisively, it risks letting organized crime gain even more control over the region. That's why these maritime patrols are not just law enforcement. They're part of a larger strategy to contain a growing security threat. These cartels are quick to adapt. When land routes became harder to use, they turned to the sea. When older methods were stopped, they built faster boats. And when one crew gets caught, another is already waiting. It's not just about avoiding jail. It's about protecting a system that brings in millions weekly. What makes the fight more urgent is that these criminals are not just drug runners. They are part of a violent shifting structure that works across borders, uses military tactics, and fights to stay in business. That's why US forces must be prepared for resistance and act quickly and precisely to avoid loss of life and keep control of the coastline. But while the US steps up its game at sea, the real question is who's helping these criminals reach our shores in the first place. Let's take a closer look at what's happening inside Mexico. There's growing concern that parts of the Mexican government may be protecting the very cartels that the US is fighting. While Mexico officially claims it's working with Washington to stop drug trafficking, multiple reports and leaked documents suggest that some police and military officials are either cooperating with cartels or being paid to look the other way. In cities close to the US border like Tijuana, Juarez, and Nuevo Laredo, entire neighborhoods are under cartel control. These areas are no-go zones for journalists and even for Mexican police. People who speak out disappear. When the US Coast Guard or Navy stops a cartel boat at sea, there are serious questions about how that boat got past so many Mexican patrols in the first place. In 2023, a major scandal broke when a group of Mexican soldiers was caught escorting a truck filled with fentanyl. That same year, an anti-cartel police chief in Jalisco was assassinated just days after announcing a new crackdown. These events are not rare. According to a 2024 report by the DEA, Over 35% of Mexican law enforcement agencies in HITRA regions have confirmed or suspected cartel ties. This isn't just about corruption. It's also about fear. Cartels often threaten families, bribe judges, or fund political campaigns to buy silence. Once someone is under their control, it becomes nearly impossible to stop cooperating. The Mexican government has limited power in certain regions because local leaders are already under cartel influence. The situation worsens because some politicians seem more focused on managing public opinion than solving the problem. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has repeatedly said that hugs not bullets is the right approach. But critics argue that this policy has only allowed the cartels to grow stronger. Instead of using force, many drug operations are ignored, especially when they happen far from major cities. This raises a serious national security question for the United States. Can Mexico be trusted to police its coastline? If cartels are launching boats just miles from Mexican Navy outposts and nobody stops them, is that by accident or by design? The U.S. government has quietly increased surveillance flights over parts of western Mexico. These missions track boats leaving cartel-controlled beaches and heading toward U.S. waters. Some operations have even picked up radio chatter between cartel lookouts and unknown ground forces, suggesting a level of coordination that may involve state security units. These findings are deeply worrying. They suggest that the cartels may have more power than many people realize, and that some Mexican institutions are failing to act, not because they can't, but because they won't. As the lines between law enforcement and organized crime blur in Mexico, U.S. officials are asking an urgent question. If we can't trust them to stop the cartels, should we start doing it ourselves? The following section explores that bold possibility. With growing doubts about Mexico's ability or willingness to stop the cartels, some in Washington believe it's time for the United States to take matters into its own hands. The idea is simple. If the enemy operates just across the border and local forces won't act, the U.S. should strike directly, even without Mexico's approval. This approach has already started on a small scale. Earlier this year, U.S. Navy drones flew unannounced into Mexican waters to track suspected cartel vessels. The missions were quiet and fast, lasting less than 20 minutes, but marked a significant shift. For the first time in years, the U.S. was willing to break diplomatic rules to stop fentanyl before it reached American shores. Officials argue that waiting for Mexico to act is no longer an option. In 2024 alone, more than 71,000 Americans died from synthetic opioid overdoses, many from drugs that came through cartel routes. That number is higher than the death toll from most modern wars. Supporters of direct intervention say that if a foreign group killed this many Americans every year, the U.S. would already be at war. However, acting without permission brings serious risks. Mexico is still a close trading partner, and any military strike on its soil, even a small one, could cause a diplomatic crisis. The Mexican government has warned that such moves would violate national sovereignty and might even lead to a breakdown in cooperation on immigration and border security. Despite those concerns, more lawmakers are backing the idea. In Congress, several bills now propose labeling cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. This change would give the U.S. legal power to use military force against them, just like it did with ISIS or Al-Qaeda. One bill introduced in early 2025 even suggests that U.S. Special Forces could carry out cross-border missions if there's a credible threat to American lives. That's a big deal. And it's not just talk. According to leaked Pentagon documents, the U.S. military has already created contingency plans for limited strikes on known cartel bases, including safe houses, airstrips, and supply depots. These targets are carefully chosen to avoid civilian areas, but any mistake could cause massive backlash. The idea of U.S. troops on Mexican soil without permission is deeply controversial. Critics say it could backfire, making the cartels look like victims and pushing locals to support them. Others warn that once the U.S. starts acting alone, it will be blamed for anything wrong, even if it saves lives in the short term. Still, public opinion is shifting. A 2025 national poll by Pew Research showed that nearly 62% of Americans support limited military action against drug cartels, even if Mexico objects. That number jumps to 78% among families who have lost someone to fentanyl. As pressure builds and patience runs out, Washington must decide, do we wait for permission or act to protect our people? The following section reveals what happens when the CIA is behind the scenes. When regular diplomacy stalls and military options are too public, the CIA often steps in, and this time, it's happening just across America's southern border. As tensions grow, the CIA is quietly leading a hidden war against the cartels, using tools that don't need permission or headlines. Over the past months, satellite images and intercepted communications confirmed a series of covert drone strikes on suspected fentanyl labs in northern Mexico. Neither did the government announce these strikes. No flags, no public claims. But the precision and timing point to a familiar playbook, the same strategy the US used in Syria, Somalia, and Yemen against terrorist networks. What makes this different is the target. Instead of extremists with AK-47 second, the enemies are cartel bosses operating under civilian cover. Intelligence reports show that some drug labs are built next to schools or churches to avoid detection. The CIA's job is to destroy those labs without harming the surrounding population, a task that requires advanced tech, exact data, and zero margin for error. Sources inside the Pentagon revealed that a new drone, the XP-4 Shadow Wasp, is now being used in these missions. This small, silent aircraft can fly for 12 hours and strike with pinpoint accuracy. Its laser-guided micro-missiles can destroy a lab without damaging nearby homes. These weapons are so precise that one strike hit a drug shipment being loaded into a truck with the driver still on the phone. But even secret missions come with consequences. Mexican officials know these strikes but remain silent, possibly out of fear or lack of control. Some local governors have accused the US of breaking trust, while others seem to quietly support the action, saying it saves lives that Mexico alone cannot protect. Inside the US, reactions are mixed. Some praise the CIA for stepping up where diplomacy has failed. Others warn that covert action without apparent oversight could lead to civilian deaths or spark wider conflict. If a strike hits the wrong target, even once, it could ignite protests, lawsuits, and anti-American sentiment across Latin America. What makes this moment unique is the lack of transparency. In past operations, the public knew when and where the US struck enemies abroad. But this time, most Americans are unaware that their government is already at war with drug cartels, just not in the open. Despite the risks, these missions are expanding. A leaked Homeland Security memo revealed that 12 more targets have been approved for elimination over the next 3 weeks, all in areas too dangerous for local police. These targets include fentanyl storage bunkers, cartel-controlled airstrips, and safe houses linked to cross-border smuggling routes. While politicians argue in the spotlight, the real battle is already underway. Silent, precise, and led by a hidden hand. But how far will the CIA go before silence turns into scandal? The next part uncovers the cartel's explosive response. The cartel response didn't take long, and it was brutal. Within 72 hours of the CIA's suspected drone strike on a fentanyl lab, several American-linked facilities in northern Mexico were attacked in what appeared to be a well-planned retaliation. At dawn, an oil truck exploded outside a warehouse in Metairie that had been used by a U.S. logistics contractor. Less than 12 hours later, a group of masked gunmen stormed a telecom tower owned by a company with American investors. While no U.S. citizens were killed, at least 4 Mexican workers died and dozens were injured. These attacks weren't random. They sent a chilling message. We know who you are and we can hit back. Intelligence analysts now believe the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, 2 of Mexico's most powerful drug empires, have formed a rare alliance. Typically bitter enemies, these groups are now sharing information, weapons, and targets to push back against the growing pressure from U.S. surveillance and drone strikes. One shocking development came when a local DEA informant was found murdered. His body left with a sign written in blood-red paint, "No more eyes in the sky." Officials say this was a warning to U.S. agencies operating in the region. In response, the U.S. Embassy issued a security alert for all American government workers in Mexico, telling them to avoid travel outside major cities. The cartels have also turned to cyber tactics, releasing videos on social media showing cartel members with stolen military gear and threatening American interests. In one clip, men in body armor stand next to what appears to be a captured US-made drone. While its origin is still being confirmed, the timing of the video suggests it was meant to embarrass Washington and show the world that the cartels are no longer afraid. Even more disturbing, reports from Mexican law enforcement indicate that several local mayors were kidnapped in cartel-controlled zones. These political abductions are meant to destabilize regions and make it harder for U.S. intelligence to coordinate with local forces. One mayor was released with broken fingers and a message burned into his chest. Traitor. This wave of retaliation has caught U.S. officials by surprise. Many assumed the cartels would lie low, not escalate. But this response shows a new kind of cartel warfare, one that includes sabotage, media manipulation, and high-value targets. These are no longer just drug traffickers. They are armed groups acting like insurgent militias. Now, with American lives indirectly threatened and allies on the ground being hunted, Washington faces a tough decision. Pull back and risk giving up momentum or escalate and turn a covert mission into a regional crisis. With attacks intensifying and the cartels adapting fast, the next move from Washington will shape the future of the war on fentanyl. But could the enemy already be inside the system? The past few days have made one thing clear. The cartels are no longer playing defense. After the suspected CIA drone strike, they've launched a coordinated wave of violence from deadly bombings and political kidnappings to psychological warfare and propaganda videos. Their message is loud and direct. They're ready to fight back, even if it means pushing the region toward chaos. This isn't just a war on drugs anymore. It's a fast-evolving battle that blends organized crime, armed insurgency, and digital threats, all happening right on America's doorstep. U.S. officials must now decide, do they double down or risk losing control? But the biggest question is still to come. What if the cartels already have allies inside the very system that's trying to stop them? And that's what Blue Navy wanted to share with you today, bringing you the most honest and up-to-date insights backed by in-depth analysis from top military strategists and political experts. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support is what drives us to keep creating more high-quality and in-depth content. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below and stay tuned for our next video. See you soon.